Part 1. The Innocence. It was Sunday, July 21st, 1861, at a low Virginia ridge above a shallow stream called Bull Run. The morning comes slowly. Before the sun breaks the horizon, the light is only a pale thickening in the mist. Canvas tents glow faintly. The shapes of parked gun carriages and wagons emerge as gray silhouettes. Horses stamp and snort along the picket lines, their breath hanging in the cool air. Somewhere a bugle falters through reveille, the notes thin and lonely over the murmur of 30,000 men waking to their first great battle. On one rise west of the little creek, Battery G, 2nd U.S. Artillery, waits in position. The guns sit in a precise line, 6 bronze Napoleons, muzzles dark with dew, pointed toward the unseen Confederate positions beyond the trees. Behind them, limbers and caissons stand neatly dressed. Harness lies coiled, traces run straight. It is the kind of order that comes from years of habit and drill, regular Army discipline embedded in iron and wood. Near the rightmost piece stands a young officer, his dark frock coat marked with a single silver bar on each shoulder. First Lieutenant Alonzo H. Cushing, class of 1861, United States Military Academy at West Point. 20 years old. He has been with Battery G only a matter of days. Temporarily attached, one more fresh graduate sent forward to stiffen the great citizen army now assembled outside Washington. Among the gun crews around him are men who have served on the frontier and in Mexico, men who have spent more than a decade handling these pieces in all weathers. They move with an easy, unhurried efficiency, checking limber chests, feeling wheel hubs, adjusting harness. He watches them, and they, in turn, watch him. The veterans know the look of a new lieutenant. They have seen dozens come and go. They know which ones will steady under fire and which will crumble. This one is book-thin, pale-eyed, his face still holding some of the boyishness of the Hudson Highlands. But his boots are already scuffed from the march, and his gaze stays on the guns, not on the spectacle building beyond the ridge. Because there is a spectacle. As the light strengthens and the mist thins, the slopes and hilltops behind the army begin to fill with civilians. They arrive in wagons and carriages from Washington and the nearby towns. Congressmen and their families, merchants, clerks, newspapermen, ladies in bright summer dresses, children clutching small flags. Wheels grind through the soft ground, horses pick their way between stacked muskets and piles of packs. The smell of wet earth and horse sweat mixes with the incongruous sweetness of fresh bread and fruit. Picnic baskets appear from the backs of wagons. Folding camp chairs are opened and planted on convenient knolls. Men raise brass opera glasses to their eyes and survey the distant wood lines as if they are settling in for a fine performance. A vendor from the city, having followed the crowd, hawks coffee and cakes to anyone with coin. For many of them, this is an outing. The first great battle of a war that, everyone says, will be short. A rebellion to be chastised, a spectacle to be witnessed. Down on the slopes, among the ranks of soldiers, the mood is nearly as careless. Volunteer regiments raised in a rush that spring crowd the fields and fence lines. Their uniforms are a patchwork: dark blue frock coats, gray state jackets, gaudy zouave outfits with baggy red trousers and sashes. Muskets lie stacked in tripods while men lounge on the grass, smoking, laughing, playing cards. Some have kicked off their shoes, others eat berries from their caps, fingers stained purple where they have stripped the hedgerows clear. A captain tries to dress his company into line. His voice, unused to command, cracks as he shouts. Half the men do not hear him over the chatter. A sergeant barks the order again. The men shuffle into place, belts askew, slouching under half-packed knapsacks. The line bends and wavers and finally settles into something like order. From the ridge, Alonzo watches all of it. On the surface, it is almost festive. Flags snapping in the morning breeze, bands tuning up in the distance, the buzz of excited conversation. But beneath that noise, he hears other sounds, the clink of iron, the creak of leather, the restless shifting of men who did not sleep much during the night. He notices the way some of the volunteers glance toward the tree line and then away, quickly. The way hands fumble on cartridge boxes. The way laughter comes a little too loud. He has seen soldiers drill before, seen them on review and parade. But this is something different. This is an army that has never really fought. For a moment, the scene on the ridge dissolves into another parade ground in his mind. The great plain above the Hudson at West Point, bright under a clear June sky. In that remembered June, gray-clad cadets stand in straight ranks, white crossbelts bright against their coats. Artillery drills unfold with mathematical precision. Action front, by-piece forward, load, fire. Each command answered by a practiced motion. Guns swing from line to column as if guided by a single mind. He remembers graduation only weeks earlier, class of 1861, lined up in dark frock coats, shoulder straps newly sewn on, the air thick with speeches and expectations. Friends from the South stepped into their futures, some toward the same flag as his, others toward the one he now faces across these fields. The academy, like the nation, divided along fault lines that had always run beneath it. Those clean lines and tidy equations feel far away now, replaced by the patchwork reality, stretching out from Bull Run's banks. The Army begins to move. Battery G falls into the growing column. Ahead, down toward the creek, infantry regiments tramp along dusty roads and across fields, guidance marking their progress like bright stitches across the land. The civilians shift from hill to keep the view, some following the army in carriages or on horseback. The sound of distant artillery reaches them first as a dull thud, then as repeated blows that roll across the miles like thunder. On the far ridges, thin white puffs appear, hanging above tree lines. A breath later, the reports arrive, mingling into an irregular drumbeat. Men react in different ways. Some fall silent, eyes lifting toward the source. Others laugh too loudly at crude jokes. Fingers tighten on musket stocks. One young volunteer stumbles off the road to retch in the weeds, the reality of battle finally catching his throat. Battery G takes the news calmly. They have heard guns before. They check equipment one more time. Hands brush holsters, saber hilts, primer pouches. A sergeant reminds drivers to keep proper distance under fire. The captain rides a little closer to the head of the column, scanning the terrain ahead, already choosing potential firing positions in his mind. Alonzo feels the reports in his ribcage as much as in his ears. For years, artillery has been tables and diagrams, angles, charges, trajectories. He has memorized the effect of spherical case, solid shot, canister. He has watched perfect drills on manicured fields. Now the abstractions are giving way to a reality no blackboard can fully prepare a man for. He breathes dust and horse sweat and the first faint tang of powder riding the air. The column inches forward, halts, inches forward again as traffic jams build and unravel. Each stop brings new fragments, a courier galloping back, a bloodied man borne to the rear on a hastily rigged stretcher, a thicker smear of smoke over the treetops where the creek bends. The march to contact is ending. The contact is about to begin. Part 2. The Battle. By late morning, the Army's leading elements reach the crossings of Bull Run. The stream itself is a narrow, twisting thread of brown-green water, shaded by trees and flanked in places by muddy banks. It does not look like the sort of barrier around which history will pivot. Yet every movement, every shouted order now anchors on this line. Union troops push across at various fords and bridges, sometimes under direct fire, sometimes catching Confederate pickets off balance. Smoke begins to seep through the woods in lazy sheets, torn by the first serious gusts of battle. Battery G's route takes them toward ground that will soon be known by a farmhouse and a hill. The closer they get to the stream, the more the air thickens, with smoke, with dust, with noise. Rifle fire rips and pops like tearing canvas. Artillery booms overlay it in deeper notes. Shouts blend into a continuous roar. The battery is ordered up toward a low rise that faces a broad, open slope. Somewhere beyond that slope, behind fences and tree lines, Confederate guns answer the Union barrage. The command goes down the line. The battery unlimbers. Horses swing the guns off the road and onto the rise. Men jump down from limbers, drop trails, and pivot the pieces into position with practiced heaves. Limbers wheel to the rear. Caissons find their places. In a matter of moments, bronze muzzles stare out over the fields. This is the part Alonzo has rehearsed 100 times in his head. Now he sees it under a sky streaked with smoke instead of Hudson blue. The first salvo roars out. Recoil jars the carriages, wheels biting into soil, smell of burnt powder slams into the nose, smoke erupts from each piece and is immediately torn and mingled by the wind, curling about men and metal. Across the way, enemy batteries answer. Shells scream overhead or burst short, throwing up gouts of earth. Fragments whine past. Dirt rains down on gun crews. A fragment clatters off a wheel beside Alonzo's boot. He moves along the line, helping spot fall of shot, passing corrections, lending hands where they are short. Words are brief, functional. There is no room now for decoration. The battle expands and deepens around them. Union infantry push forward across fields and up slopes, rifles firing in volleys at first, then breaking into irregular crackle as formations compress, falter, reform. For a time, the blue lines seem to be driving the gray steadily back from the creek, capturing ground around farm lanes and fence lines. Civilians on the distant hilltops see only this broad push and cheer. From Battery G's position, the picture is more complicated. Reports arrive that Confederate reinforcements are coming in from the west and south. Officers point to a particular rise crowned by a modest farmhouse and scattered trees, Henry House Hill, where new flags and formations are gathering. Among the Confederates taking position, there is a brigade under a Virginia general named Thomas Jackson. He and his men settle along the slope and crest, anchoring a line that refuses to give ground. From afar, through smoke and heat shimmer, the effect is simple, a solid mass that does not move under pressure. Union officers on the scene will later describe that sight with a phrase that sticks. Whatever is actually said on that battlefield, the meaning is clear enough. On that hill, the Confederate line holds like stone. The fight for Henry House Hill intensifies. Union guns, including Battery G, trade fire with Confederate batteries clustered around the farmhouse and along the ridge. The air connecting the two positions becomes a lethal corridor, shells arcing, fuses burning down, explosions walking their way across open earth. Alonzo watches the difference in behavior between seasoned troops and green ones at this distance. On the hill, the gray ranks rise and lie down in controlled motions, closing gaps as men fall. Around him, some Union volunteer regiments waver as the fire grows hotter. Lines bend. Officers shout themselves hoarse, trying to steady men who have never faced such punishment. The battery captain keeps his voice level as he orders changes in elevation and fuse length, trying to beat down the guns on the hill and tear at the infantry massing behind them. Gun after gun fires, the crews almost mechanical despite the chaos. Time compresses, moments burn themselves into memory. A man thrown backwards as a shell fragment finds him. A limber chest splintered, its contents spilling bright brass. A horse collapsing mid-stride, trace chains snapping taut. Between such flashes, routines hold: sponge, load, run up, aim, fire, repeat. Then enemy infantry begin to press closer. Through breaks in the smoke, gray figures appear, moving in uneven lines down the slope and across the fields. Some attacks are beaten back by rifle fire from Union regiments still in position, but others gain purchase using folds in the ground and whatever cover they can find. For Battery G, the danger grows as supporting infantry becomes less reliable. Reports, some true, some garbled, reach them that regiments to their flanks are falling back. Men glance sideways more often between shots. The sense of a broad, orderly battle begins to dissolve, replaced by the feeling of isolated islands surrounded by dense fog. Orders come to shift fire to closer ranges. Canister is brought up. The first canister rounds shriek from the muzzles in clouds of iron balls, tearing at advancing lines at ranges measured in dozens of yards rather than hundreds. The effect is devastating, and still not enough to halt every push. Smoke now clings to the ground in thick layers, making it hard to see beyond the closest targets. Shapes appear and vanish. Sound is everywhere. The percussion of guns, the slap of bullets into earth and flesh, the raw cries of wounded men and animals. At one point, Confederate troops close to within frightening distance of the guns. Gun crews fire double charges of canister, ramming one round down on top of another for maximum effect. The ground in front of the battery becomes a churned strip of dirt, bodies, and splintered wood. Men at the pieces work with a ferocity that has little to do with drill manuals and everything to do with survival. A caisson takes a direct hit. The explosion is a violent bloom of splinters and flame. Horses rear and scream, men are flung to the ground, chests blown open, limbs torn away. Smoke and dust momentarily obscure the position, then clear to reveal a gap where a portion of the battery's lifeline once stood. Others move instantly to compensate, hauling ammunition from remaining chests, shifting loads, closing ranks. Through all of this, Alonzo moves along the battery, helping to plug holes where he can. He feels fear like everyone else, tight in the gut and dry in the mouth. But motion and necessity leave little room for dwelling on it. Orders must be passed. Ranges must be judged. Guns must keep firing. The day's balance is shifting, however, and not in their favor. Union attacks against Henry House Hill grow less coordinated as exhaustion and confusion take hold. Confederate counterstrokes, supported by the solid center on the ridge, begin to punch holes in the blue line. Rumor runs ahead of fact. This regiment has broken. That brigade is out of ammunition. Enemy cavalry is on the flank. At the guns, the effect of these reports is felt in the thinning of friendly fire around them. Rifles grow quieter to their front. Men running past toward the rear become a more common sight. The battery captain reads the signs along with whatever orders reach him through the din. At last, the command comes: limber up. It is not a panic order. It is given with the same steady tone as load or fire. But every man hearing it understands what it means. They cannot hold this ground much longer without infantry in front of them. The guns must be saved while there is still a chance. Under continuing artillery and small arms fire, teams are brought forward. Gun trails are heaved around. Limber hooks find their eyes. Men who have worked the pieces all day now strain to get them moving again, shouting to horses half deafened by the noise. They pull back from the line, one gun after another, pausing only to fire when ordered, buying time for others to move. Shells burst behind them, sometimes among them. One carriage lurches wildly as a horse goes down. Another team surges forward to drag it clear. As they withdraw, the wider scene comes into view. What had been an advancing army in the morning has become a broken, shifting mass in the late afternoon. Columns are blurred. Command relationships fray. Men fall out in clumps or stream past in disorder. The word rout is not yet official, but that is what it is becoming. The road back toward Washington fills quickly. Battery G, like other regular units, tries to maintain some semblance of order, even as volunteers and civilians pour around them. Gun carriages and limbers push through crowds of men on foot. Wagons loaded with wounded, overturned carriages, scattered equipment. This is the beginning of what will carry a bitter nickname in the years to come, the Great Skedaddle. For Alonzo, The day's violence at the guns and the chaos on the road form a single continuous experience. The shift from battle to flight is not marked by a bugle or a drum roll. It is felt in the tilt of bodies, the direction of movement, the tightening of throats. He rides with the battery's column as it joins the tide heading north. The orders now are simple. Keep moving, keep the guns, get back across the river. Men who greeted dawn with laughter and speeches now trudge with faces slack from shock and exhaustion. Some discard muskets and packs to lighten their load. Others cling to them stubbornly, unwilling to surrender the symbols of the roles they stepped into only weeks ago. On the verges, civilians who rode out for a day's entertainment flee in their own ways. Carriages racing, wheels rattling over ruts, baskets and parasols bouncing to the roadside. A top hat lies crushed in the dust, its owner vanished into the stream of humanity. Battery G's veterans sit tight in saddles and on limbers, hands steady on reins and handspikes. They are beaten, they know it, but they intend to bring their guns home. Part 3. The aftermath. Night comes in layers over the retreat. First, the sun drops behind low hills, turning dust in the air to a red-brown haze. Faces lose detail, becoming smudges of pale and dark. The world resolves into silhouettes, wagon boxes, gun carriages, slumped shoulders. Then the sky deepens to purple and black, leaving only scattered points of light. Lanterns swing from wagon frames. Small campfires glow at field edges when units halt briefly. The silver thread of the road ahead is visible only in patches. The army does not stop. Regiments, with some shred of order left, move in uneven columns. Around them flow streams of men without clear unit attachment, friends clinging together, men who grabbed onto the first familiar face when formations dissolved. Wounded men walk when they can, supported by comrades, or ride where there is space in overburdened wagons. Along fence lines and under trees, some simply sit down and do not get up again, at least not that night. Battery G stays in motion, its guns rolling on behind tired teams. Drivers sit hunched in saddles, eyes gritty. Men on the limbers sway with the movement, snatching brief moments of sleep when the road is smooth enough. The fear that the Confederates will launch a full-scale night pursuit rides with them, though in reality the victorious army is nearly as exhausted and disorganized. Every distant shout, every crack of a branch in the woods carries an edge. At intervals, the column halts to untangle some blockage ahead, wagons jammed at a narrow point, a broken axle, a team of mules down and refusing to rise. In those moments, men drop to the roadside, collapsing where they stand. Some sleep instantly, others sit staring into space, muscles too tight to let go. When the order comes to move again, they stumble back to their feet. For Alonzo, this night is his first real experience of defeat, not as a concept in a strategy lecture, but as a physical reality, measured in dust, darkness, and the sound of a beaten army dragging itself from the field. At some point, perhaps toward midnight, perhaps later, no one will remember exactly when, the mood begins to shift from raw panic to something else. The immediate terror of an enemy charge out of the dark recedes as miles fall behind them. Exhaustion takes its place, heavier but less frantic. The pace slows slightly. Commands become less clipped. Officers manage to hold formations in tighter shape. Finally, faint gray shows in the eastern sky. One layer of strain eases. Men can see one another's faces again. Trees and buildings emerge from the gloom as shapes instead of looming shadows. The road ahead becomes more than an endless tunnel. They are not yet safe, not yet home, but they have survived the night. As dawn spreads over northern Virginia, the roads leading toward Washington present a sight few had seriously imagined. The army that marched out in confidence only days before now returns in fragments. On the main approaches through Centerville and Fairfax Courthouse, and at the crossings toward the Potomac, men, guns, wagons, and civilian vehicles flow in a steady, disordered stream. Some units arrive with colors still flying and files roughly intact. Others appear as clusters of men from regiments that no longer exist on paper. To civilians near the outskirts of Washington, the first sign that something is wrong comes not from official word, but from sound. Before the sun is fully up, they hear the creak and rattle of wheels, the clop of hooves, the tramp of many feet on the roads south of the city. Dust hangs in low light, drifting between stands of trees. Early risers who walk out to see what is happening find wounded men moving past, some supported by comrades, some alone. As the morning advances, doubt vanishes. Lines of wagons, some still carrying supplies, others hastily filled with wounded, bottleneck at the bridges. Artillery units roll up with mud-caked guns and hollow-eyed crews. Stragglers in torn uniforms drift along the verges. On the Virginia side of the river, traffic snarls. Bridges that in peacetime carry a modest, steady flow now have to handle the return of a battered army. Military police and engineers struggle to impose any kind of order, pulling down fences to widen approaches, directing columns into makeshift lanes, giving priority where they can to the worst hurt and the most essential equipment. Battery G reaches the maelstrom after the darkest hours have passed, but before the flow has settled. Their passage to the bridge is slow, punctuated by halts as knots in the traffic are worked loose. When their turn finally comes, the guns roll over planking that echoes under iron-shod wheels. Below, the Potomac moves in its steady, indifferent way, carrying reflections of morning light. On the Washington side, sentries and officers watch the remnants cross. They had seen these units march out not long before, flags bright, bands playing, spectators cheering. Now those same formations, or what is left of them, come back subdued, reduced in number, their banners stained and torn. The shock is not confined to the Army. Within the city, news outruns official statements. Extra editions of newspapers hit the streets with headlines that speak of repulse, disaster, stampede. Stories mix confirmed facts with rumor and speculation. Some editorial columns lash out at military leadership, others call for new resolve. Churches, public halls, and large private buildings are converted into hospitals almost overnight. Rows of cots line nave and meeting hall floors. The smell of blood, carbolic, and sweat becomes familiar. Volunteers arrive with bandages and food. Surgeons work until they can barely stand. Along the streets, citizens watch returning troops pass. Some stand in stunned silence. Others call out questions of any man in uniform. What happened? Are we beaten? Where is this or that regiment? Answers are fragmentary and often contradictory. We almost had them. They flanked us. Everything broke at once. Each response carries a shard of truth and a layer of self-protection. In the White House and War Department, the impact is immediate and heavy. President Abraham Lincoln, who had gone out briefly to observe the Army before the battle, now receives a flood of reports that confirm what the streets already show. The first major field army of the Union has been hurled back from its objective and sent reeling to its own capital. He reacts with a mixture of dismay and determination. Within days, he calls for a far larger number of volunteers, this time for longer terms of service. Short 3-month enlistments, conceived when many believed the rebellion would be quickly suppressed, give way to commitments measured in years. Legislation moves to expand the regular army and bring more state troops under federal control. He also looks for new command. General Irvin McDowell, whose plan at Bull Run rested on optimistic assumptions about his Green Army's capabilities, is relieved. In his place, Lincoln summons Major General George B. McClellan, a younger officer with a growing reputation for organization. McClellan arrives in Washington to take charge of what will become the Army of the Potomac. Almost immediately, the rhythm of life around the capital changes. Forts rise on surrounding hills, earthworks and timber bristling with guns. Lines of pickets extend out along roads and ferry points. Camp after camp appears in formerly empty fields, laid out with more method than earlier in the year. Drill becomes constant. On open ground outside the city, infantry regiments march and wheel in formation, flags snapping above them. Cavalry units practice charges, artillery batteries conduct firing exercises on newly established ranges. The spectacle, where civilians still watch from a distance, is no longer that of a parade. It is the sight of an army learning, under pressure, what war demands. For Alonzo Cushing, the weeks after Bull Run mark the beginning of a new phase. Battery G receives replacement equipment for what was lost or damaged on the field and in the retreat. New horses arrive, half-trained, to fill gaps in the teams. Fresh recruits appear to plug the holes left by casualties and sickness. His performance during the battle and the withdrawal, steadiness under fire, competence in managing a difficult movement under extreme stress, does not go unnoticed. In an army suddenly short of experienced junior artillery officers, even limited combat time carries weight. Gradually, his duties shift. He still takes his place with the guns for regular work, but more often now, he is called on to instruct. Recruits from towns and cities across the North pour into Washington. Many have never fired a weapon, saddled a horse, or handled anything like a cannon. They arrive in civilian clothes or half-fitting uniforms issued in haste. Their motivations are varied: anger, patriotism, adventure, economic need. Whatever brought them, they must now be turned from individuals into soldiers. Artillery has its own steep learning curve. An effective battery is not merely a row of guns. It is a machine in which each man's movements are tied to those of others, each horse's step linked to a pattern, each limber and caisson placed with purpose. On dusty drill fields outside the forts, Alonzo stands with other officers and sergeants and walks new men through routines he once performed in cadet gray. Commands that echoed over the Hudson now ring out over rough ground, cut by wagon ruts. Action front. By piece forward. Load, ram, fire. The men carrying them out are farmers' sons, clerks, laborers, students. They make mistakes. They forget steps. They fumble tools. Some laugh their errors away. Others flush with embarrassment and work harder on the next pass. Repetition does its work. Day after day, they sponge and load, run up and fire practice charges. They learn to move guns at the walk, trot, and gallop. They learn to swing from column to line, to unlimber at speed, to bring ammunition forward without tangling themselves in their own teams. Alonzo finds that the memory of Bull Run guides his insistence on precision more than any academy manual. He remembers what it was like when infantry support vanished without warning, when ammunition ran short at a critical moment, when one missing team could mean abandoning a gun. Each correction he makes on the drill field, each insistence that a limber stand here, not there, that a man stand thus, not so, is shaped by those images. He pushes hard. Some of the new men dislike him for it. He can see it in their faces when a mistake forces them to repeat a maneuver yet again. He does not take it personally. Better, he knows that they resent him on this field than lie broken on another. From time to time, he crosses paths with his brothers again in the city. Howard remains in the ranks, his reliability slowly earning him promotion through the non-commissioned grades. William moves more firmly into naval service, his restless energy soon to find expression on rivers and coasts rather than Virginia fields. Their meetings are brief, caught between duties. A few words near a depot, a handshake outside a headquarters tent, a shared memory or two before orders take each of them back to his own sphere. Yet these crossings matter. They remind Alonzo that the war's story is bigger than any one branch or field, that its threads run through families as well as units. Visitors come to see the transformed army taking shape, around Washington. Congressmen, foreign observers, journalists watch drills and reviews. They see forts where there were none before, organized brigades where there had been crowds, supply trains moving with more regularity. If they look closely, they also see something else. It is in the set of men's shoulders, the way they handle their weapons, the quiet that falls over a battery when a command is given. The army that staggered back from Bull Run is not the same as the one that will march out again. For Alonzo, these months are a forging period. The rout and the night road remain sharp in his mind. He can picture Henry House Hill, the unbroken Confederate line, the moment when his own side cracked. He does not let that memory paralyze him. He uses it as a tool. He reminds himself and the men he trains that courage alone is not enough. He saw brave men run when formations dissolved and commands failed. He also saw the effect of discipline on that hill where the gray ranks held, and in the way his own battery pulled back in good order. One cool evening, after a long day on the drill field, he stands at the edge of the range as the last smoke drifts away and the sky darkens. Guns stand in a straight line, barrels cooling, metal catching the last light. Men move among them, cleaning, covering, securing limber chests. Beyond the field, through a gap in the trees, low hills roll southward into the distance. Somewhere beyond those hills lies the next campaign, and the next, the long, brutal road that will eventually run to a farm near a Pennsylvania town called Gettysburg. He does not know the place by name yet. He cannot see the low stone wall where his path will end, but his steps are bending toward it. Behind him lies the memory of a carnival morning at Bull Run and the disaster that followed. Around him, an army is learning to be something more than a crowd in uniform. Ahead of him waits a war that will be longer and darker than most imagined on that July day. For now, he is one officer among many, shaping iron out of raw metal, turning lessons paid for in blood into drills that may keep other men alive. The carnival is over. The iron time has begun.